Every day there are little details, things you don't consciously think about, or maybe you do, that warp your perception of the world and change the decisions you make all the time. This is the power of perception. Listen in to learn more on today's episode. And welcome back to the Murdy Creative Co podcast. I'm your host, Colin Murdy, and today's topic is the power of preference. But first, I want to say thank you to everyone who's supported the company so far. If you ain't got a chance, go check us out on the web at murdycreative.co. That's M-U-R-D-Y creative.co, or you can check us out on all of our social media pages. I've talked about this in the past. In fact, I've talked about this a couple of different times in a couple of different ways, and I don't think I've actually talked about this explicit topic, at least this way, but it became relevant recently as I've been working through some of the pen challenges. And it was a discussion. This was actually prompted by a discussion with a friend of mine. We are both individuals who partake in the rights given to us by the Second Amendment, and or I guess the rights given to us by God, defended in the Second Amendment, and enjoy shooting from time to time. And we live out in the countryside, so it's very common out here, and there's a rich culture around it, but it always sparks a conversation about which gun is the best one to use. Right. Now, if any of you have been in the gun community, you realize that this particular discussion is one that people have very strong opinions about. And at the same time, the deeper you go into the specifics, the more you realize that many of the things that warp people's thoughts on these things are preference-based. Right? I'll give you some specific examples. And this applies to cars and shoes and watches and everything. I'm just going to use guns as a specific because it's an easy one to point to. Let's say you have a gun. Gun A fires 5,000 times. In those 5,000 times, it has 9 malfunctions. 9 instances where, for whatever reason, the gun didn't go off when you pulled the trigger. And then you have gun B, and it is fired 5,000 times, and it has 3 times that it doesn't go off. Well, someone who is a big fan of gun B would say, well, it's 3 times better than gun A, right? And mathematically speaking, they're technically correct. But at the same time, the difference between the two is so minor that it doesn't really matter. And there's a reasonable argument to say that, of course, it matters, right? The details matter. And the answer is it kind of does, but it also doesn't. And here's what I mean by that. Let's say person A loves gun A, and they hate gun B. They just don't like the way it looks. They don't like the way it feels in their hand. It doesn't fit them very well. They don't like it. Well, if they love gun A, they're going to take care of it. They're going to maintain it. They're going to practice with it. They're going to spend time figuring out kind of the manual of arms, which is the way that you reload it easily. And so in the moment that counts, they're likely to be far better suited to use gun A than gun B, even if it's more reliable. And so the power of that person's preference can warp the reality that would otherwise say that gun B is better. This is true of cars. This is true of shoes. Like I said, watches is an easy example. There's plenty of things in our life. It even goes down to technology, right? What phones we use, what computers we use, right? Every facet of our life is warped by our preferences. Now, this is meaningful in a couple of technical reasons, right? As product designers and product developers, as marketers who have to figure out how to promote something, as individuals who have to make little decisions that make big differences. Those personal preferences not only can warp the way that your customer perceives your product, they actually warp your perception of your own product. Now, where do these preferences come from? There is no good answer to that question. They come from things like our history, things we've seen, things that we observed. Maybe when we were growing up, we watched someone do something very cool. I grew up watching World War II movies and thinking they were awesome. And so for me, the 1911, which is the all-metal pistol that was the sidearm during World War I and World War II, I love the 1911. I think it's the best gun ever, right? And objectively, if you were to just go by the straight numbers, there's some evidence to that, support that, and then there's evidence to support that it's not true, right? That there's alternatives that are better, right? So maybe it comes from your history growing up. Maybe it comes from society. Hollywood different things like that, videos, media you see with people who you respect using something. It's interesting because Dr. Peterson talks about how we don't pick what we're interested in. It's like our interests jump out at us. Something grabs our interest. And he goes back to Jung and the concept of animating forces and things like that. But I think broader, I think in the broad topic especially, he's right. We don't pick what interests us. Something just interests us. And if we could direct our interest, like a spotlight, our lives would be a lot better. It'd be a lot easier to say, oh, I'm very interested in my homework even when I'm not, and then you'd be able to work on it, right? So sometimes things interest us and sometimes they don't. And like interests, like hobbies, like entertainment to some extent, right? We don't really necessarily get to pick what speaks to us, what sparks interest in us. And in the same way, I don't think we really get to pick what we have for our preferences. Now, we can make decisions that are counter to our preferences, and as time goes on, sometimes our preferences changes because our taste, as it were, changes. And I think that could be a side effect of growing up in life and decision-making and realizing that perhaps the thing you liked may not have been all you thought it would be, right? There's educational side of preferences that come into play. For me, though, the conversation has gotten very practical in my life right now, because I am currently working on revamping the formulation of the leather and not revamping, but designing the pen, right? I'm also working on the bag line, and that brings up a lot of questions. Because one of the benefits of the free market and one of the benefits of the free system of commerce that we enjoy is that the system accounts and takes into account for preference. If we were just a centrally planned economy and there was a car that was a really good car, it was reliable, it had easy to change parts, it was durable, and it was super ugly, a centrally planned government might say that that's the car we're going to go with. Honestly, a centrally planned government would just go with whoever pays them off the most to have their car be the car of choice. But the point is that you get my idea that in an ideal circumstance, they would say, well, this is the best car. Objectively speaking, on paper, it's the best car. So it's going to be the car everyone has. And people would be, safe and reliable, and they'd hate driving their car, right? And on the flip side, the free market says, well, if you want a sports car that looks really cool and is terrible for reliability and terrible for safety, that's your choice, right? We'll provide you with an option for that. And there are modest reasons that we say, okay, well, that shouldn't be utterly true, right? Everything should have a seatbelt. Everything should have airbags, right? There should be fundamentally elements of safety built into things. And just like in my original gun analogy, 9 misfires out of 5,000 and 3 misfires out of 5,000 is fundamentally identical in reality. But if it was 90 misfires in 5,000 versus 3 misfires in 5,000, well, then all of a sudden those differences become a lot more meaningful, right? So the caliber of the distance. So I think when I'm going back to is that when the fundamental things are met, preference becomes the priority for decision making. As long as the good or service you're buying meets a minimum fitability for what you need it to do, interest takes over. Preference takes over. So for me, where this really comes down to is when I'm reviewing the changes to the leather and I'm thinking through their magic, their manifest feels. I don't know how else to describe it. The je ne sais quoi, the essence of the leather. It's really hard to pin down what element of the leather is wrong or is right. And that's one of the challenges in this art, is that I have to be able to pick up a piece of leather and go, this isn't right, but I can't tell you why. And every designer who's a graphic designer out there just groaned audibly. And I know that that's a problem. And I do my best whenever possible to work with the tanners to say, okay, it's too stiff. It doesn't feel right in my hand. It doesn't bend or crack right. It just isn't the right thing, right? And I try to give them more specifics. But at the end of the day, at the bottom of the line, sometimes things just aren't right. And it's subtle why it's not right. And it's really hard to figure out why it's not right. And in some regards, that's your preference manifesting. Now, I do think it matters a great deal. In fact, I think the preference matters as much as any other aspect. I think preference matters as much as the technical aspect. Within reason. The leather reformulation is to solve a specific problem. As we solve that problem, there may become a reality where the solution to the problem, the fundamental solution to the problem, precludes the possibility for it to be identical. Well, that's probably likely. In fact, if you think about it logically, of course, it would be almost impossible to accomplish the same results but solve the problem of the original and have it be identical. Right? That'd be pretty great. But so you have to come up with a reasonable barrier of compromise. You have to come up with an area where you say, okay, it's too important for us to solve this problem, for us to just ignore it. So how can we minimize the downsides while maximizing the upsides? That's where the trade-off is, right? And here's a genuine question, and feel free to respond to the comments below. Would you prefer the leather to have a smoother, slightly glossier surface if it didn't bleed? Right? And I mean, I think the answer is probably yes, and unfortunately, that is a decision that will have to be made. I wish I didn't have to make a decision, and then we could just be like, it's exactly identical in every way, and it doesn't bleed, right? And like I said, we're still working towards that. But as we evaluate the different options, it becomes increasingly clear to say, okay, there's going to have to be a minor change. Now, we can make it so that it looks exactly the same in pictures. We can make it look exactly the same color-wise. We can make it so that the surface even has a very similar kind of matte-ish finish. But it isn't identical, because that's not possible. And so this is where preference becomes important. And for me, it's a critical part of our product line because we love our products, and I love every one of my products. And for me, I understand in a very real way that there's just something about leather that you can't really quite describe, but it's better. There's something about your preference for leather that maybe it's genetic, goes back into history, right? Echoes to our past. But only some leather does that. And I know that for a fact, right? The leather used in ice skates is a good example. The white leather used for the classic white ice skate is very distant from the original hide that came off the cow. Yes, the original hide is still there as the base, but the surface has been corrected using sanding mostly to a level that's incredibly high. And the pigments and plastics and resins and waxes and oils and everything that has been infused into that leather and the bleaching process to make it white, all of those things, every step of those things moves it further and further away from its original. Now, there's a little secret in all of this. The original cowhide, you wouldn't like either. The classic leather that you feel when you feel our products, the classic leather that you see when you think of like cowboy leather, that's not how leather looks in its raw form. That's not even close to how leather looks in its raw form. In fact, if you saw leather in its raw form, if you saw leather even from the original hide to the first step in the raw tanning, in the tanning process, which takes a unstable biological product and stabilizes it, you'd pick it up and you go, oh, what's this, right? So one of the little secrets of the leather industry is that you don't really want real unfinished leather either, but you also don't want leather that's so finished to the point where it feels totally, completely fake. And so there's a middle ground, and obviously good leather fits that middle ground perfectly. It has the feel that you're looking for. It goes even as far as the development of my pen. Right? My personal preference is I hate pens where you click them, and then if you flip the pen over, the clicker falls down, and it's like, it's free, it's loose. I hate those. For me, I want that when I click my pen, it to not fall down, right? I also like the fact that, I don't like the fact that when the clicker is clicked, it pops right back up using spring tension like the jotters, so you can't really tell if something's clicked if you're just holding it in your hand like this, right? So for me, I want it so that when it's clicked, it doesn't flip over and it stays down. And in fact, this particular mechanism that I came up with is what I'm calling my soft click. I'm going to come up with a better name, I think. I don't know, maybe that's not that bad. It allows for you to click it silently And it allows for you to click it audibly. Now that obviously is a practical function. I like to fidget with my pens, and sometimes that really annoys people sitting next to you. So being able to click your pen silently has an advantage, right? But some people may not like this mechanism. Maybe they won't be able to articulate why, but they might not like it because of a preference. And that's okay. That's a good thing. In fact, developing these products in many ways I have discovered is, for me, a joy of expressing my own preferences for things, right? It's my own desire to have the things I want in the world to exist. And then the good part of marketing is if I can find people who agree with me that that's the best version, right? They have a similar preference to me. And thank goodness I'm pretty normal. So things I like, I think a lot of other people like. So as I'm developing this pen, and I have to make decisions about how we're going to make the mechanism work, and how the design is going to be, and how heavy it's going to be, and what's the taper going to be on the end of the barrel, and how's the grip going to function, and what size is the clip going to be, and how does the clip hold its place, and what's its shape. I mean, there's infinite number of decisions, and they're all, once the technical base has been met, and all of them, of course, meet that technical base, the question is preference. And that's really important. There's a lot of people out there that, I have several of them that are my friends, that think that preference is all arbitrary. And not only do they think that preference is arbitrary, they think that you should just like the best version out there. And you should only buy the best version out there. And the best version can be determined through math, technical improvements. And for me, it's funny because I, as a marketing person, as someone who deals with a natural product like leather, know that that's not even remotely true because many things can't be quantified. There's a qualia, there's a quality to things that you just have to experience it to properly understand it. And it comes to fruition when I'm working through the ceramic coating that's going to go on the internals of the pen, right? The ceramic coating is designed to protect the internals of the pen and so that they don't wear out over time, right? The ceramic is extraordinarily hard. It resists any sort of wear and tear, especially, I mean, the ceramic coating that I'm using was originally designed for firearm parts, and they go through pretty aggressive forces, and it doesn't wear out there. So you clicking your pen is not likely to produce the kind of force profile that would damage this coating ever. So the coatings that I'm looking at, they're all likely to meet kind of a baseline technical correction. Like they will not wear out over time, right? And all of them will equally not wear out in this context. But they all have with them slightly different properties. Slightly different lubricities, slightly different hardnesses, slightly different coefficient of friction. So because they have these different elements to them, and I can look at those elements on paper and compare them, you could make a decision based purely off the paper, but I don't think that's the right way to make this decision. I think at the end of the day, and this is what I'm going to end up doing, I just have to make prototypes of each of the different kinds of coatings and see which one I like best. Is that the best way to make this decision? Probably, in my opinion. Is that the most scientific way? No. But we aren't really rational creatures. Humans aren't really rational. We like to pretend we're rational. Like, I make good decisions based off of, like, rational thinking. But people don't really make decisions based off rational thinking. At least not consciously. A lot of times you can come up with rationalizations for the decision you make, and it'd be wrong to say that those rationalizations aren't true, right? But I don't necessarily think that the rationalizations that someone gets and comes up with for doing something was really what motivated them in the first place. I think it's what their brain gave them. Rory Sutherland talks about this a lot. He says that the brain's logical and rational faculties are the brain's PR team. It's not really a decision-making body. It's merely to come up with reasons so that when you have to explain yourself to other people, you don't sound like a lunatic. Because answering someone, why did you do that? Because I wanted to, is not a qualified answer. That is not an answer that anyone really accepts. So your brain, because we're social creatures, has a built-in tool to say, oh, here were the acceptable reasons to you why I did this thing, even though they may not have been the reasons in my mind. And I think he might be right about that. I mean, obviously, It's hard to imagine yourself as being an irrational creature doing irrational things and then post-rationalizing them all the time. It's hard to imagine that, but at the same time, I think the evidence bears it out. And when you look at your own decision-making, it takes a very mature person to admit that the decision that they made was because of personal preference and not due to some technical reason. Especially for a certain type of individual out there. There are individuals out there who believe that they are making the absolute best technical, rational decision and that their decisions are utterly researched to the end and they are absolutely correct in their decision making. And their decision about what they think is the best is factually the best. I have a good friend like that. In reality, I think that's just rationalization post. I think that's just a continuation. I'm not saying that you can't walk into a situation, learn information, develop a preference for something, and make a decision based off of real technical information. I'm not saying that you can't do that. I'm just saying that most time we don't do that. Most of the time we like the shoes because we like those shoes. Oh, they happen to have good support, happen to be comfortable, happen to allow me to run fast. Awesome. But I don't think that's what made us like them in the first place. And part of it is because it's beneficial to us to make decisions quickly. Today's limited edition hint is olive bison. We've been on a real bison kick. It's really good stuff. I don't think that's how people make decisions. I don't think people make decisions like that frequently. I think that it's helpful for us to make decisions in a quick way, in a gut instinct, heuristically, whatever. I just like that one, right? Because I think there's a whole bunch of subconscious factors that play into our decision making that we don't know, but are actually important. People, before the discovery of germ theory, would have picked up excrement on their kitchen floor in a way that did not touch their hands, if they could manage it, and get rid of it out of the house. And they would have scrubbed the spot where the excrement was. Why did they do that? Well, they may not have had a conscious answer as to why, right? We in the modern day say, well, we had to do that because of germs. Well, they didn't know about germs. They just knew that it was gross, right? Well, why? This is my point, though. You do things automatically because there's something in you that might know more than your conscious brain can know and executes based off of those decisions. So do not minimize your personal preferences. Do not minimize personal preference as a factor in your decision making. And when your friends or family or whatever say, well, that's not the best one, right? Why'd you pick that one? That one's not good. Because I liked it is a perfectly reasonable answer. Because at the end of the day, we don't live lives of technical maximization. We don't buy cars because they're the absolute technically best. We buy cars because they're fun to drive, because we need to get from point A to point B, because they scratch an itch, they have a cool back end, or they have a cool front end, or their engine seat makes a noise I like, right? We don't need to maximize our technical performance in life. We need to maximize the best amongst the reality of our human decisions. And sometimes I just liked it is an excellent answer. In fact, I think it might be one of the best answers. Because that joy is a gift, right? That joy is a gift from God. So own it. So enjoy it. And I would love to hear all of you agree with me. So say nice things in the comments. No, I'm just kidding. I would love to hear if there have been things in your life that you have bought that was not the best, quote unquote, decision because it was technically inferior in some meaningful way, but you have decided and discovered over the course of using the product or living with the thing or doing the thing that it was the best choice for you. Not because of the technical disadvantages or advantages, but because it was just the best, because you just liked it, because you were happy with it. I would love to hear stories about that. If you think I'm wrong, feel free to mention that in the comments too. But I think I'm right. So Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Be sure to check back in next week for the next topic, and don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and hit the notification bell. If you have any questions or concerns about your product or anything we do, feel free to send us an email. You can contact us on the main page of our website at murdycreative.co. That's MURDY creative.co. You can also give us a phone call, 414-434-9001, or if you'd like to text us, you can also text us at that number, 414-434-9001. We're available Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Central Time. We do not work on federal holidays, so we won't be able to reach you then. But if you call us during those hours, you don't get a hold of us, leave us a voicemail. We'll give you a call back. If you'd like to leave us a good review on a product that you've received, go to murdycreative.co/reviews. No, excuse me, murdycreative.co/review, singular. murdycreative.co/review will take you right now to Google. It was to Facebook. It's taking you to Google right now because we're trying to improve our SEO, and it'll leave a review there. That redirect always will take you to wherever we hope to have the reviews left, because that allows us to be able to kind of change where those reviews go so that we can optimize for the current environment, right? Which is right now Google heavily. So you can go leave a review there. You can go to murdycreative.co/reviews to read all of our reviews, both on Facebook and on Google. We do love when people say nice things. It is something I read. I read the reviews out loud to the team. A lot of times when you send us nice things in the email, we post it in our company Discord in the back end so that everyone can read and appreciate it. We really do love it. So we want you guys to be happy. If for whatever reason you're unhappy, we're happy to take care of it. Don't leave us a bad review. Just let us take care of it. Let us fix it. We will take care of you. We will. If you would like to get a custom engraved item, we have no minimum order quantities and no setup fees. It's a simple flat fee, normally about $15, but it can depend on the complexity and size of the engraving. You can go to most of the product pages, and there's a blue button there that says Add Custom Engraving, or Add Custom Logo. I can't remember. Click on the blue button. It'll take you to the customizer, and you can upload logos. You can add text. You can change things around. You can move things around. It's great. You can also get a bunch of those. So if you're a company and you want to get your company logo on something and you want to get 50 of them, you can just do that all on the website. It'll auto-apply the bulk discount and you can just check out right straight from there. Right? So that's an easy way to do it. If for whatever reason you don't see that blue button, because not all the products are in the customizers, we're working on it. But if you don't see that blue button, send us an email. We are happy to help. We will create a custom mock-up for you as well as a custom link that you can use to check out with that specific customized product. We are here to help. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Have a great day. And goodbye.